Okay. My name is Don Green. I'm a lawyer in Nevada and California, now 40 years. And the principal emphasis of my practice is representing people in firearms cases, gun dealers, gun shows, engaging in firearms litigation against the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the alcohol, tobacco, firearms, explosives, the federal government, and in being involved in the gun litigation on the magazine ban and the assault weapon ban in California. Today we have a special broadcast, and I mean special, because on May 31st, 2023, or if May 31st has already passed when you see this broadcast, you have to be aware that the Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms and Explosives regulation regarding arm braces for AR-15 or AK-47 type pistols or a multitude of other pistols goes into effect. And this program is designed to show you what you can do in the next couple of days and what you might be able to do to avoid being classified as a felon for the possession of what's known as a National Firearms Act weapon. With me today to explain some of these points and operational characteristics of the AR-15 platform, and we're going to deal with that today, is Ms. Maggie Mordaunt of Homeland Personal Protection, Personal Protection Training. Ms. Mordaunt, would you introduce yourself, please?
Yes, my name is Maggie Mordaunt, known as CCW Maggie. I am the owner of Homeland Personal Protection, and you can go to my website, hpptraining.com. I am a Bass Pro Shops Pro Staff member here locally in Las Vegas. I am a Nevada Department of Wildlife Hunter Education instructor, as well as the Nevada Firearms Coalition's Education and Training Director.
Thank you, Ms. Mordaunt. May we have the first slide, please? We have before you the actual from the ATF website about factoring criteria for firearms with attached, stabilizing braces, arm braces. They come by dozens of names. Maggie, would you, for our listening audience and our viewing audience, for those people who have just purchased AR-15 type pistols, for those who even have AR-15 rifles, can you explain to us what a stabilizing brace is or what an arm brace is that's commonly referred to on the street?
So they were originally designed for our veterans who may have actually been wounded at war and or in the military. And also, it's also great for someone who has arm issues, hand issues. You could actually fashion it to your arm, stabilizing with whenever you're shooting it. It actually helps with deviation, so allowing you to have more stable shot placement abilities, also managing felt recoil. So a lot of people really started to purchase these, not just because they were wounded, because they just felt that it was a great firearm that they wanted to have. And so the benefits are that it can actually help with, especially if it is an AR pistol. It is something that we're seeing, even in Texas, we're actually seeing that Fold AR came out with their pistol, and you have security who are actually carrying them on school property in little backpacks. They're very easy to deploy, and so there are some great benefits to having something like that. And so this law has just become something that is more of a hindrance and an attack on our Second Amendment.
When you mentioned a moment ago that the AR-15, this type pistol platform is easy for these armed security officers or armed policemen, put them in their backpacks, isn't that also true for people who are going to want to shoot up Walmart, shoot up a hotel, shoot up a school? Isn't that part of the argument that all these people have forced their congressmen and forced people in the ATF to try to limit these types of platforms?
So taking away the tool does not cause more sanity. So you have bad people who are going to do bad things, and they're going to find ways to do it. This is just another tool that they may have actually chosen. I mean, there's people out there who are being knifed. More people are killed with hands and feet than anything else. So I think this is just more optics, more media, and just more control that they're trying to enforce onto its American citizens.
May we have the first slide? The first slide, and we'll jointly talk about this. Does the ATF regulation on arm braces have the force of law? From a lawyer's perspective, the answer is yes. We have thousands of regulations out there, everything from regulating diabetes medications to air quality to catalytic converters to firearms to the types of tires you can have on an 18-wheeler to the types of couplings that you can have when you're pulling a bottom dump in a dump truck. There are tens of thousands of regulations which are promulgated by each of the agencies in the federal government. And by way of of advice is that every federal agency which proposes a new regulation, regardless of what that regulation is, that proposed regulation must be published in the Federal Register. That is based on the Administrative Procedure Act, which is found in Title V of the United States Code. So you hear a lot, Ms. Mordaunt, that the ATF cannot take away your Second Amendment rights by this regulation. As a trainer, as someone involved in this from the perspective of trying to show people how to use their weapons and talking about firearms in general, give us your little insight, or excuse me, your insight on this problem.
So the biggest problem I'm seeing here is that they're focusing on the wrong thing. We have a mental health problem in our country, and that's what they should truly be focusing on. Modifying and modifying and modifying again and again and again is just insanity. They're trying to blame a tool for the actions of the ill intentions of men and women and children. And so when we look at these specific firearms, or any firearm, whether it be a revolver with a brace on it, a semi-automatic with a brace on it, a AR pistol with a brace on it, an AR-15 with a brace on it, an M16 with a brace on it, it just doesn't matter what it is that they're trying to modify. I think they're just thinking that if they insert their own ideology into it, that something magically is going to happen and that bad people are suddenly going to get better. So when it comes to owning firearms, we are law-abiding citizens who purchase firearms, and I believe that what they're going to try to do is maybe just make some money off of it. Hopefully they're not going to try to demonize people who actually may have these firearms, who may even have already went in and did the whole registration process, which that's a whole other conversation right there.
Yes, we're going to discuss some of that in just a few moments. May we have the next slide? Okay, now we're getting into the meat and potatoes of this program. What is a buffer tube? If you could explain that, Ms. Mordaunt.
So we have the buffer tube here, and so what we have is we have a spring load here that actually helps with the inertia, and so this here is something that the bolt carrier and the spring system work hand in hand together. And so if you don't have this on there, you don't actually have protection from the bolt carrier. It's going to come back and hit you in the face if we take this off.
So we had some people in the recent gun show, good people, said they had just bought an AR pistol, and they said, I'm going to comply by taking the entire back, the entire back of the AR-15 with the buffer tube and the stock, and I'll fire it. Now, Ms. Mordaunt, I'd like you to explain in terms of a trainer why that's a really bad idea if you're going to use that as a functional weapon.
Now, if we're taking the buffer tube off of and our stock off of the AR, we actually will have a hole here, And even if you did put a piece of metal there, you have nothing that's going to absorb that inertia, that bolt carrier movement from the gas pressure and all the internal components that move inside. So now you're faced with potential harm to yourself. Now there are some AR pistols out there that have the buffer tube encased into the frame here, so you could technically take off the brace and still shoot the AR pistol in its entirety this way without that brace. So you could potentially do that, but for the ones that are not designed that way, you're putting yourself in harm's way.
So we've got millions, assuming that this model is an AR-15 pistol, less than 16 inches on the barrel. When someone asks the question or says, I'm just going to remove the buffer tube, we're not criticizing that person, but what is your observation of that person's training or knowledge of his or her weapon?
Many a time someone will go in and they'll purchase a firearm, they'll pass that background check, they'll buy the gun, they can afford to do it. The biggest failure is not taking a training class and learning how to efficiently use the firearm in the context in which you intend to use it, even if it's just for recreation. I will say that the AR-15 platform is a great home defense rifle. It's far more efficient than a shotgun. The size, it's comportability, it's compact. You have more magazine capacity in the event that there's a home invasion. And then also for sporting, it's a great sporting rifle as well. If I'm going to use a 308 for a hog hunt, it's a great platform. It's a great design from Armalite Rifle.
But here's another question. Is it your considered opinion that when someone purchases this firearm, assuming they have no prior military or law enforcement or other type of training, would you say that that person should be advised that he or she needs to get training with the weapon to understand the operational characteristics?
It is very important, just like anything that you may purchase. Read the owner's manual, go to the manufacturer's website, learn more about that firearm. Find a vetted instructor. My husband, Ken Ortega, is actually an amazing AR instructor. He's a pro at it. We have classes where you go all the way from the very, very beginning, learning how to take the entire firearm apart, put it back together, clean it. Cleaning care and maintenance is vitally important, especially also what type of ammunition am I going to be using in this firearm? What type of ammunition is training ammunition? What type of ammunition is defense? Because over-penetration with the wrong ammunition may even be an issue. And we can't always assume that our law enforcement and military even know how to use these firearms. I actually train a lot of law enforcement and military, and they've never even shot ARs before. And so, we want to make sure that everybody has that education. And again, context is huge. In what context are you going to be using a specific firearm that you purchase?
May we have the next slide? We've gone over the operational, but let's go to a question on the operational characteristics of the AR-15 pistol. And using this example, can you show us what happens when the trigger is pulled? Start from there, and so that our people understand what is it that this buffer tube does, and what does the stock do at that moment.
So you have the spring-loaded system. You're going to basically, this is a toy, but you would normally have a bolt. You could run the bolt. You have your bolt carrier on the inside. You have your chambered area. You have your magazine here. So loading the magazine, running the bolt. You have your safety right here that you can manipulate with your thumb. This thing is ready to go. And so when you then touch and extend, touch, and press, if you were shooting the AR pistol, we can extend it out all the way and shoot. What's really great about the AR pistol and having that internal buffer system is that it does actually help absorb a lot of that felt recoil. And that's what's pretty cool about the AR pistols, is that the style of firearm that it is, it is very unique in its design. And again, just, you have magazine capacity, you have the ability to manage that felt recoil. And I will say that in some AR pistols, they have less felt recoil than some semi-automatic handguns and or even revolvers for that matter. So reacquisition of the target is much more efficient. You have the ability to put more optics on here. You have other tools that you can put on here to help you stay successful in whatever it is you tend to use it for, whether it's defense or recreation or hunting.
Tell the audience what happens at that particular moment when the trigger is pulled relative to what we're talking about today, the buffer tube.
Definitely. So you have your buffer tube in here that allows for that absorption of that inertia, that internal blast on the inside. So you have your breech area where you're going to have that combustion. You're going to have some gas pressure in there. If you take that buttstock off that actually has a buffer tube in it, you lose that. You're going to get a lot of felt recoil. You're also going to have a dangerous situation where now the bolt carrier has nothing to keep it from coming out backwards. So that's going to injure you. So you definitely want to make sure that if you are going to, and I'm just saying, if you're going to get your brace, your stabilizer, if you're going to remove it and get rid of it, make sure that the type of firearm that you have, that you can do that with that. Because at the end of the day, you're going to cause more damage to yourself than anything else.
You raise an excellent point, because now the ATF says that even though you have installed this buffer tube, which, and I'd like to call everyone's attention, we'll get to the regulation in a few minutes, but you have to go deep inside this new regulation, all the way to page 162 to find out that the buffer tube on a standard AR-15 pistol, where it's not designed to be fired from the shoulder, is legal. And that's in the regulation. I've actually Xeroxed this page, and it's in the case where my AR-15 pistol with only the buffer tube. But here's what you've got to worry about. There's now circulating that if you still have your buttstock here, and you've got it in your house, you've got it in the case with the AR, you are now in constructive possession of a short-barreled rifle, SBR. So what do you do with this part? You trash it. You cut it up into pieces, or as with this one, you disable it by pouring resin into it, so you've got to chip all that resin out to get this tube to work. And putting it in a storage facility 30, 40 miles from your house, you still have constructive possession because you have the key to the storage unit. Leaving at your brother's house in Keokuk, Iowa, you still have constructive possession, although you're in Texas. So get rid of it, sell it, cut it up into pieces, and throw it away. It's not worth it. Now, if you have other AR-15 platforms in your house, such as rifles, can you put it in that case? That's an issue. To avoid the issue, get rid of it, because most people will only own one of these per weapon in a lifetime. It's polymer plastic. It's practically stronger than steel. You can drop this from a helicopter at about 100 or 300 feet onto the tarmac at the airport, and it will not break. It will not break. It's virtually indestructible. So the thing is, get rid of it. And that's what I'm telling my people to do. It's not worth it. Leave it at my sister's house. No, just get rid of it because of the law of constructive possession. And as Maggie points out, if I may, if you have your AR-15 pistol and you take it apart, you put the upper receiver here and the lower receiver, and you put the buttstock over here, it's still constructive possession. Get rid of it. It's not worth it. And if you need another one, just go pay the 30 or 40 bucks online, or go to a gun store and you'll pay $45 to $60. May we have the next slide? Okay, Maggie, we're looking at something here, and I'd like to read something into the TV. This is from the ATF regulation published on Friday, January 13th, 2023. I'm going to read it. Quote, One objective design feature ATF may consider is whether the attachment is required for the cycle of operations of the weapon, which would indicate that the weapon is not designed nor intended to be fired from the shoulder. For example, an AR-type pistol with a standard 6 to 12-inch buffer tube may not be designed, made, or intended to be fired from the shoulder, even if the buffer tube provides the surface area that allows the firearm to the shoulder fired. Period. End quote. So this little over 1 inch area is not designed to fire from the shoulder, although it's technically possible. Maggie, can you fire a pistol from your shoulder?
No.
Can you hold a pistol to your shoulder?
To brace it against your shoulder?
Oh, brace it against your shoulder.
Brace it against your shoulder, the slide's going to hit you.
Okay.
I can maybe shoot a revolver from here.
There you go. But it's not designed to fire from the shoulder, correct?
Not. It's not.
So if I had a commercial, here's one of the things that's an exception. If I have a commercial from one of the gun dealers about an AR-15 and he puts it on YouTube and someone is firing from the shoulder, the ATF is going to consider that particular weapon to be a short barrel rifle.
Correct.
Although the regulation says not generally, but they're looking at the manufacturer. So the ATF, and I'm going to tell you something right now. The ATF agents with whom I have worked over the past decades are good agents who know what they're doing. I have never known a single situation, and I've seen on TV, you see those situations, but I've been a lawyer a long time, and I have never seen any ATF agent who has ever done anything wrong or illegal or questionable. I may question the search warrant. I may question whether or not someone filled out a 4473 correctly from a dealer. I can question that there was only the last 3 letters of a social security number as opposed to 4, an honest mistake, things like that. But they're not out to get people. And although there's some YouTube broadcasts which are saying they're going to come to door, well, they technically can, but comply with the law. May we have the next slide, please? Now, Maggie, here is something which is sold or was sold at every gun show. What is the viewing audience looking at?
It appears to be a grip with the AR pistol brace.
And tell me, when that is, can we have that slide again, please? Tell me, when you attach that to your firearm, assuming that May 31st has come and gone, and you have not registered this firearm, what does that do to your AR pistol?
It turns it into an SBR, a short-barreled rifle.
Okay, and explain to the audience
So
what an SBR is, and get into, if you can get a little bit of history, because I think a lot of people need to know this. Go ahead, please.
So if you have an SBR, you have to have a tax stamp. Now, this is a one-time tax stamp that you purchase, and so it is a National Firearms Act firearm. So like suppressors, you also have to pay a tax stamp for that as well. And so it would actually be covered under that National Firearms Act. And so taking our AR pistols, they would not technically be deemed pistols anymore. Anything that is an AR pistol after this May 31st, 2023, they are going to be deemed short-barreled rifles, and you'll have to register them. And so now we know that that common conversation of registration of firearms, we see they're easily confiscated. And so who's to say now that, if they regulate some other thing against the AR platform, that they're going to start coming to your door and claiming those firearms from you because you've registered them.
Let me give a little bit of history to our audience. The National Firearms Act goes back to the early 1930s, during Prohibition, Al Capone, and the tax stamp was $200. In 1932, you could buy a house for $400. So $200 was the wrath of God. The actual stamp, which is used for on the ATF Form 1, Form 4, that tax stamp is the same stamp which was used since the 1930s. It has not changed. It is, if you get on Jeopardy, it is the longest running stamp in the history of the United States. It's still the same stamp. It's a big stamp and it goes to the top right of your paper. And you better make sure that it's only you, because if you let your buddy use that weapon at the gun range, you're both going to jail, because you're not allowed to transfer it even for a moment. You can't have anybody else shoot that suppressed weapon, or a short barrel rifle. So right now, until May 31st, if you get it by midnight, the $200 tax stamp fee is waived. There have been, from what I hear, tens of thousands of people. We don't have the exact numbers yet, but tens of thousands of people have been registering their weapons as short barrel rifles because they don't want to take off the buffer, the stock itself,
The brace.
And there are again tens of thousands of people who are complying by removing the brace and putting on the buffer tube. And my advice is, if you've never done this before, or this is your first AR, you need to have this done professionally. There's a guy that's doing it at the indoor swap meet. As you're going into the indoor swap meet, in the main aisle where it says Desert Inn Road, he's right there on the corner. $70 installed out the door. You need to have it done professionally, because you need to have that right torque. It's not something that you can just screw in. You really need to make sure you are dealing with a firearm. You're dealing with a firearm which is firing a cartridge. Although it's a little bit bigger than a 22, what is it, maybe 1,500, 1,600 feet muzzle velocity per second?
For sure.
And the recoil, of course, is absorbed into the tube itself, and that's why it's necessary. So that's by way of history as to the National Firearms Act. So we've had gun registration on short barrel rifles and sawed-off shotguns, machine guns, and suppressors for 90 years. So when these people talk about gun registration, they really don't understand the history. Now, one thing you've been mentioning mentioning a lot is the bolt carrier group. Now, again, many of our people in the listening audience may have bought you their first AR pistol, AR-15. What is the bolt carrier group, and if you can explain it with the model?
So we have a visual here. So if we could bring up the
please.
visual. We have a nomenclature visual, so let's move on to the next one. There's a parts and pieces, all the nomenclatures. Next one. So just so they get a visual here. You can see, well,
Go to the next one, please.
I don't know that we have a bolt carrier one, but this is fine. So in the chambered area in the middle of the firearm there, just above the magazine, just to the right of the grip, above the trigger guard and trigger, you'll actually see on the inside there, that is your chambered area. That's the breech area where you have the combustion. So when a cartridge is picked up by the bolt and placed into the chambered area, you have your extractor that also hinges onto the case rim. So upon pressing the trigger, the firing pin is going to come forward, ignite the primer, ignite the gunpowder, and then you're going to get that gas pressure. The bullet's going to spin down the barrel. The bolt carrier is going to come back. All that gas pressure is causing all that internal movement. The extractor is going to pull that casing, and it's going to flip out of that area there, that breech area, and pick up another round and load it back into the chamber. You have more ammunition in there, and it's ready to go again.
Thank you. May we have the next slide? Do I still have time to register my AR-15 pistol and wish I want leave the configuration and the arm brace on the weapon itself? Yes, you do have the some time to do it till May 31st, or if it's already passed, you may have a problem. You need to contact the ATF, and if you do, they're going to come to your house. They're going to knock on the door. what are the things that you can do under this regulation? Number one, register your current weapon as a short barrel rifle. Number two, turn the weapon into the ATF. I don't recommend it, but you can. Number three, have the weapon destroyed per ATF regulations. Number four, you can add a longer upper receiver. The upper receiver you can buy all day long. You can buy them online. You don't have to register those. What's registered is the lower receiver, the lower part of the weapon. You can put a longer barrel on that, or you can take that off and put your buffer tube. Next slide, please.
So that barrel does need to be at least 16 inches
At least
long.
16, yes.
Yeah, 16 inches long.
Yes, more than 16 inches or more. And it's less than 16 for the short barrel rifle.
Correct.
Are there any limits to rulemaking by federal administrative agencies? The answer is yes. And I want to let everybody know that towards the end of this program, we're going to show that there was an injunction in Texas which was denied at the federal district court level, but was granted in limited part within the past 96 hours. And we'll discuss that in a minute. So there are limits to the rulemaking. So when you hear these pundits online that say the ATF cannot make these regulations and they're not enforceable, well, I only tell my clients that I'm going to give you 50 cents for your first phone call when you call me from the Federal Detention Center. Yes, they can make a regulation. You must comply. There are no exceptions unless there is a national injunction. That's what the people in Texas who wrote this brilliant lawsuit, but the federal district judge was siding with the government for the purposes that the U.S. District Court judge said that he did not believe at that point that the plaintiffs, this Texas gun group, could meet its burden to show that it would likely succeed on the merits of the lawsuit. What that means in English, I'm denying your injunction, but in federal court, you can immediately appeal an injunction, and they filed an emergency appeal within the past 2 weeks, and then the preliminary decision ordering a preliminary injunction for limited purposes was only within the past 96 hours. Next slide, please. Now, we talked about this regulation, and Ms. Mordaunt had brought the actual regulation, and I had pointed out page 162. And Ms. Mordaunt, if you can give us your take on the regulation itself from the perspective of a firearms trainer.
So, I really feel that if you're going to take your AR pistol and put that modification on it, the thing I'm seeing is now we still also have to, the way I understand it, we also still have to register that same AR pistol as a short-barreled rifle. And so we have to get that tax stamp. Being responsible gun owners, also being law-abiding citizens, following through and getting that done. Now, there's some limited time, and who knows if people in rural areas are even learning about this. So we have to be concerned about the fact that there may be individuals out there that don't really know that this is going on. And so that's really kind of one of my concerns is they're going to be demonized. And so anybody who didn't really know that it was going on is the person who may actually get in trouble for it. And so modifying your rifles, again, you're going to pay some expense to put a barrel of 16 inches or longer on it, and then also registering that AR pistol as an SBR. Again, we don't really have, I mean, time has not been afforded in many cases here. And so if it's 2 to 3 days before or 5 days before or whatever it is, or it's already passed, doing the right thing is really important. So yeah, and it's all about the vote, just saying.
And again, to supplement Ms. Mordaunt's answer, one of the 5 things that you can do is make sure that your weapon has the buffer tube. The buffer tubes come in various sizes. I've seen them as long as like about 12 or 15 inches. Mm-hmm. You want to get one that's about 6 or 7 inches, which is consistent with page 162 of the regulation, which was published in the Federal Register, and which is which was signed by Attorney General Merrick Garland. So in this way, and then get rid of your arm brace, get rid of the stock, just trash it, cut it up and trash it. Next slide, please.
There is no other slide.
Okay. Now, we have a lawsuit which was filed in Texas, and I think we have that on our last point.
Yes, we have a lawsuit that was actually filed by Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. He filed the lawsuit deeming that any firearms that have the weight and the measure of any existing firearms are applicable under our Second Amendment right. And so that is the lawsuit that he's filed, stating that this is just more government infringement and that this administration is attacking its own citizens and making us in more danger, especially with what's going on in our country today. As an instructor, I feel that I have been having more and more conversation with my students about helping them learn how to defend themselves against all enemies, foreign and domestic. And so it's that foreign part that I never thought that I would actually have to have that conversation with civilians. And so teaching them how to defend themselves in their own homes, and or even in public from individuals who are not even registered in this country, individuals who are coming to our country to attack our American citizens, is just become more conversation. We have individuals coming from other countries, organized criminals who are coming into this country, and now we are in a position where we are fighting against individuals who are not going to be following the laws, who may actually be showing up with these very firearms that we're having our own government try to take away from us. And so we should have those equalizers. The equal amount of fight that is being brought to us should be afforded to us. And so I feel that when you are going to vote for somebody who believes in your right to keep and bear arms, your right as an American to have that equality against those bad people who are coming to try and attack us.
Thank you. And one of the points which I've been making since January, actually, when I first saw drafts of the rule, when they were circulating on the internet, this is what's coming up. Although I didn't see the exact drafts, or I knew that something was coming, and there was an earlier draft of this back within the past couple of years, and then the final rule was submitted on January 13th of 2023. But in taking the time, I'm talking probably 25, 30 hours of studying this regulation as proposed, I want to emphasize the following, which I've been telling people about the cycle of operations, and that is that the arm brace itself, the stock, has nothing to do with the cycle of operations. It is merely a device to shoulder the weapon and make it more comfortable. And in the ATF regulation, it even states about the cycle of operations, which is what Ms. Mordaunt has talked about in her explanations, is that when the cartridge is fired, this is Newton's law of physics, that for every action there is an opposite and equal reaction. The bullet goes forward, the gases go backwards, it hits the spring. The buffer tube houses what would be the spring, and this is part of the cycle of operations. So on the regulation itself, it states, one objective design feature ATF may consider is whether the attachment is required for the cycle of operations of the weapon, which would indicate the firearm is not designed to be fired from the shoulder. Without this tube, you cannot safely fire an AR-15 type pistol, because that bolt will come back and go through your head, through your shoulder at an incredible speed that you won't know anything until it's all over. So I've been telling people that we need to make sure that our legislators, that our people in government, our representatives understand not just what it looks like, but the cycle of operations, which is critical to this particular platform. And with that, this is what I would tell everybody, make a copy of this regulation and keep it in your bag for your weapon. So I want to thank Ms. Mordaunt today and for being here and explaining this to our viewing and listening audience. If you have any questions, and of course, we're not here to get into politics, and I'm not going to answer political questions, but if you're asking about the regulation and how much time you've got, you're always welcome to call me at 702-409-8239. I am licensed in California and Nevada, so if you're calling me from Kansas or Kentucky or whatever, although I'm familiar with firearms laws and ATF regulation applies throughout the United States, I might not be able to tell you something specific because of your jurisdiction in which you'd have to get competent legal advice wherever you live. Maggie?
Always a pleasure. I think that for everyone who may have some questions, if you want to give us a call, we have a lot of great information on our website, hpptraining.com. You can also call me, text me, email me, contact me, 702-375-5900. I look forward to hearing from you. Come on out and get some training.
Thank you. We want to thank Rigel Studios and its producers and staff for the production of this video. Thank you.